The morning sun painted golden streaks across the water as I first set eyes on Harborview bait and tackle. There was something magical about this small coastal town of Cedar Cove, where the salt-tinged air carried whispers of adventure and possibility. I'd moved here just 3 weeks ago, seeking escape from the suffocating corporate world I'd been drowning in for years. The little bait shop quickly became my sanctuary, a place where time seemed to slow down and life's complications faded with each lap of waves against the weathered dock nearby. I remember everything about that fateful day, how the gulls circled overhead, how the wooden sign creaked in the gentle breeze, how my heart seemed to skip when I first met Ryan. I hadn't planned on my life changing when I walked through that door, but sometimes the universe has other ideas. Let me take you back to where it all began, to the day when a simple, closed early sign led to the most unexpected journey of my life. My name is Jake Mitchell, 28 years old, and completely lost despite having done everything right, according to society's playbook. College degree, stable job at a marketing firm in Seattle, decent apartment. All the checkboxes ticked, yet something fundamental was missing. Fishing had always been my escape, a passion inherited from my grandfather, who taught me to cast my first line when I was barely tall enough to see over the edge of his boat. There was something about the patience it required, the connection to nature, the quiet reflection that spoke to my soul in ways nothing else could. Cedar Cove was supposed to be a 3-month sabbatical, a chance to clear my head and figure out what I really wanted from life. The small rental cottage by the shore was perfect, nothing fancy, just enough space for me and my thoughts. I'd quickly established a routine. Mornings spent job hunting online or working on freelance projects, afternoons and evenings dedicated to fishing and exploring the coastline. Harborview bait and tackle became my regular stop, not just for supplies, but for the local knowledge that could mean the difference between a successful catch and hours of frustration. It had been a particularly rough day when everything changed. A potential remote contract had fallen through. My parents had called with their usual subtle pressure about my vacation lasting too long, and dark clouds were gathering on the horizon, threatening to wash out my evening plans. The bait shop was my last hope for salvaging the day. A few hours of fishing might just be enough to reset my perspective. The bell above the door jingled as I pushed it open, expecting the familiar scent of fishing gear and the friendly smile of Mrs. Calloway, the elderly woman who usually worked the afternoon shift. Instead, I was greeted by a hastily scrawled sign on the counter. Closing early due to incoming storm. Back tomorrow at 6 a.m. My heart sank. The universe, it seemed, was determined to deny me even this small comfort. I must have looked particularly dejected standing there, because a voice from the back room called out, "We're closed, but I can make an exception if you're desperate." The voice was deep, slightly rough around the edges, like someone who spent a lot of time outdoors. When its owner emerged from behind the storage curtain, I felt an unexpected flutter in my stomach. Ryan Calloway was nothing like his mother. Where Mrs. Calloway was small and bird-like, her son was tall and broad-shouldered, with the kind of physique that comes from actual physical work rather than carefully planned gym sessions. His dark hair was slightly too long, curling at the edges where it met the collar of his faded flannel shirt. A short beard framed a smile that seemed both confident and kind. He was maybe mid-30s, with laugh lines around eyes that were startlingly blue against his suntanned skin. Just needed some bait," I stammered, suddenly feeling like an awkward teenager. "But if you're closing, I can come back tomorrow." Ryan studied me for a moment, his head tilted slightly. "You're the Seattle guy who rented the Wilkins place, right? Jake, isn't it?" When I nodded, surprised he knew my name, he continued, "Mom mentioned you've become a regular. Said you know your way around a fishing rod better than most tourists." "I wouldn't say that," I replied, oddly pleased by the compliment. "Just something I've loved since I was a kid." Ryan glanced at the darkening sky visible through the shop's front window. "Storm's moving in faster than expected. That's why we're closing early. Not going to be much good for fishing tonight." He paused, seeming to consider something. "Unless you know the right spots." There was something in his tone, a hint of challenge perhaps, that caught my attention. "Are there any right spots in a storm?" I asked. That's when he smiled, really smiled, and something shifted in the atmosphere between us. "There are always right spots if you know where to look. Tell you what, I was heading out myself before this weather hit. Got a small boat docked around the corner. If you're up for it, I could show you a place where the bass bite even when the weather turns. It's sheltered enough that we'd be safe from the worst of it. I should have hesitated. Going out on a boat with a stranger as a storm approached wasn't exactly wise. But there was something about Ryan that inspired trust, and frankly, the alternative was returning to my empty cottage to brood over rejected job applications. Are you sure? I wouldn't want to impose, I said, already knowing I would accept. Ryan was already grabbing gear from behind the counter. Not an imposition if I offered. Besides, can't have you thinking Cedar Cove fishing shuts down at the first sign of clouds. We have a reputation to maintain. He handed me a specialized lure I hadn't seen before. This works wonders where we're going. Mom's minding the store tomorrow, so I've got the evening free. What do you say? 20 minutes later, we were pushing off from a small private dock in Ryan's boat. Nothing fancy, just a reliable 16-footer with an outboard motor and enough room for 2 people to fish comfortably. The sky had darkened considerably, but Ryan navigated with the confidence of someone who knew these waters like the back of his hand. So, Seattle marketing executive takes a sabbatical in a fishing village, Ryan said as we cut through the increasingly choppy water. There's got to be a story there. I laughed, surprised at how easy it felt to talk to him. Not much of one. Just needed to figure some things out. The corporate ladder started feeling more like a treadmill, you know? Same view no matter how hard you climb. Ryan nodded thoughtfully. I get that. Had my own version of the treadmill in Portland for a few years. Finance degree, suit and tie, the whole package. He gestured to the water around us. This was supposed to be temporary too, coming back to help Mom with the shop after Dad passed. That was 5 years ago. Do you regret staying? I asked, genuinely curious. Not for a second, he replied without hesitation. Found out I was chasing someone else's definition of success. Here, I'm my own boss. I'm connected to something real, and I sleep better at night. Can't put a price tag on that. There was something refreshing about his certainty, his comfort in his own skin. It was attractive in a way I wasn't entirely prepared to acknowledge. We reached a small cove I hadn't discovered in my explorations. It was partially sheltered by a jutting cliff face, creating a pocket of relatively calm water despite the building storm. True to Ryan's word, the fish were biting almost immediately. There's a special kind of bond that forms between people fishing together. A comfortable silence punctuated by excited alerts when a line goes taut, the shared satisfaction of a good catch, the rhythm of cast and reel that becomes almost meditative. As we fished, our conversation flowed naturally, jumping from fishing techniques to childhood memories to favorite books. I learned that Ryan had traveled extensively before settling back in Cedar Cove, that he volunteered teaching kids to fish on weekends, that he could name every constellation in the night sky. He asked thoughtful questions about my life, seeming genuinely interested in my answers rather than just waiting for his turn to speak. So no special someone back in Seattle wondering where you've disappeared to? He asked casually as he rebaited his hook. I hesitated, feeling a familiar tightness in my chest. This was always the moment of decision. How much to reveal, how authentic to be. In Seattle, I'd become adept at vague answers and subject changes. But something about being out on the water with this man I barely knew made honesty feel less risky. No, I said finally. There was someone, but it ended about a year ago. He took a job in New York, and neither of us was invested enough to try long distance. I watched Ryan's face carefully, looking for the subtle shift in expression that often followed my coming out to new acquaintances, the slight recalculation, the mental adjustments. But there was none of that, just a nod and a sympathetic smile. Long distance is tough, he agreed. My last relationship ended for similar reasons. He was a marine biologist, got offered his dream project in Australia. 2 years turned into a permanent position. We tried making it work for a while, but he shrugged, casting his line again with practiced precision. The casual way he shared this information, without drama or special emphasis, made something in me relax. Here was someone who was completely comfortable with who he was, who didn't treat his sexuality as either a secret to guard or a banner to wave. Just another fact about himself, like his eye color or fishing skill. Before we could delve deeper, the weather decided to make its presence known. What had been threatening clouds suddenly opened up, rain pelting down with unexpected ferocity. The wind picked up, turning the previously manageable waves into something more concerning. We should head back, Ryan called over the sudden roar of the storm. "This is turning nastier than the forecast suggested." I helped him secure our gear as he turned the boat toward home, but it quickly became apparent that we were in for a rough journey. The small craft bucked against the waves, spray soaking us despite our rain gear. Ryan handled the boat with impressive skill, his face set in concentration as he navigated the increasingly hostile waters. "There's a small island about 10 minutes from here," he shouted over the wind. "It's got a ranger cabin that's usually unlocked. Might be smarter to wait this out rather than trying to make it all the way back in these conditions." I nodded my agreement, trying to ignore the mixture of anxiety and unexpected thrill coursing through me. There was something exhilarating about facing the elements with someone so capable, someone who took charge without panic. A particularly large wave crashed over the side, nearly knocking me off balance. Without hesitation, Ryan reached out, his arms strong around my waist, steadying me. "I've got you," he said, his face inches from mine, rain streaming down both our faces. "Just hold on." The moment stretched between us, something electric in his gaze before he turned his attention back to navigating. I remained acutely aware of the brief touch, the casual strength in his arm, the way my heart had accelerated in a way that had nothing to do with the storm. The island, when we reached it, was little more than a rocky outcrop with a cluster of pine trees and the promised cabin. A simple one-room structure that served as a rest stop for rangers patrolling the area. Ryan secured the boat as best he could in a natural inlet, and we made a dash for shelter, the rain coming down in sheets now. The cabin was basic but dry, a welcome respite from the storm. A table, 2 chairs, a small wood stove, and a narrow bunk were the only furnishings. Ryan immediately set about starting a fire in the stove, his movements efficient and practiced. "Always keep emergency supplies in the boat," he explained, pulling dry kindling and matches from a waterproof bag. "Storms can come up quick around here. Better to be prepared." I stood awkwardly, water dripping from my clothes onto the wooden floor. I feel like I should be helping somehow. Ryan glanced up with an amused smile. "You can help by not catching pneumonia. There are some emergency blankets in that cabinet. We should get out of these wet clothes." The practical suggestion suddenly felt loaded with implication. Ryan must have noticed my expression because he chuckled, a warm sound that somehow cut through the chill I was feeling. "Don't worry, I'm not making a move on you. Just basic survival tactics. Though I wouldn't complain about the view," he added with a wink that somehow managed to be both flirtatious and disarming. I found myself laughing, the tension broken. "Fair enough. Though I should warn you, I'm not exactly in men's health, cover model shape under here." "Neither am I," Ryan replied, though the way his wet shirt clung to his torso suggested otherwise. "But I promise not to judge if you don't." There was something refreshingly straightforward about him, a lack of pretense that made it easy to shed both wet clothes and inhibitions. We changed with a minimum of awkwardness, wrapping ourselves in the emergency blankets while spreading our soaked garments near the now crackling fire. Sitting across from each other in the small cabin, wrapped in silver thermal blankets like burritos, we couldn't help but laugh at the absurdity of our situation. Not exactly how I planned to spend my evening, I admitted, but definitely more memorable than another night of Netflix. "That's the thing about fishing," Ryan said, his eyes reflecting the firelight. "You never know exactly what you're going to catch." The storm raged outside, rain pounding on the roof, wind howling around the cabin's corners. Inside, however, a different kind of atmosphere developed. Intimate, almost confessional, the kind that sometimes emerges between strangers who find themselves thrown together by circumstance. "So what are you really running from?" "Jake from Seattle," Ryan asked after a comfortable silence. "Because taking 3 months off to fish in a town most people can't find on a map feels like more than just career burnout." The directness of the question caught me off guard. "What makes you think I'm running from something?" Ryan shrugged, adjusting his blanket. "Most people who come here are either passing through on vacation or running from something. You don't strike me as the typical tourist." I stared into the fire, considering how to answer. "Maybe I'm running towards something instead. I just don't know what it is yet." "Fair enough," he nodded. "But I found that understanding what you're leaving behind helps clarify what you're looking for." His insight hit closer to home than I wanted to admit. "I guess I'm tired of compartmentalizing my life," I said finally. In Seattle, I had my work self, my social self, my dating self, all these different versions of me that never quite connected. I was successful by most standards, but it felt fragmented. Ryan listened intently, his expression thoughtful. And does fishing help with that? It's the only time all the pieces feel aligned, I admitted. When I'm out on the water, I'm just me. No performance, no filtering, no strategic thinking about how I'm being perceived. Just present in the moment. That's why I came back here, Ryan said quietly. In Portland, I was playing a part, the ambitious young professional, climbing the ladder, networking at all the right events. I was good at it too, but it never felt authentic. Here, even on the hardest days, I'm fully myself. Isn't it limiting, though? I asked, voicing a fear that had been nagging at me. A small town, a small business. Don't you worry about missing opportunities? Ryan leaned forward, his expression earnest. What's limiting is forcing yourself into a life that doesn't fit, chasing opportunities you don't actually want because you think you should want them. He gestured around the simple cabin. Some would look at my life and see limitations. I see freedom. Freedom to live authentically, to build meaningful connections, to measure success by my own standards. His words resonated in a way I wasn't prepared for, touching on questions I'd been grappling with since long before my move to Cedar Cove. What if the life I'd been working toward wasn't actually the one I wanted? What if success looked different than I'd been taught to believe? The conversation flowed from there, moving from philosophical to personal and back again. Ryan told me about coming out to his parents as a teenager in this small town, expecting the worst but finding acceptance. I shared stories of my more complicated family dynamics, the unspoken expectations that had shaped so many of my choices. We discovered shared tastes in music, debated the merits of different authors, and found we had both backpacked through the same regions of Thailand, though years apart. Hours passed, the storm continuing unabated outside, while we created our own sanctuary within. The initial attraction I'd felt toward Ryan deepened into something more substantial: respect, connection, a sense of being truly seen. As the night wore on, our positions shifted, both of us eventually leaning against the wall near the stove, shoulders touching, the blanket still wrapped around us. The contact felt natural, comfortable in a way that surprised me. You know what's funny? Ryan said, his voice soft in the dimly lit cabin. Mom's been trying to set me up with nice young men for years. She'll be insufferable when she finds out I finally met someone interesting because I closed the shop early. I felt a flutter of something between anxiety and excitement. Is that what's happening here? Are we meeting in that sense? Ryan turned slightly, his gaze direct but gentle. I think we both know there's something here worth exploring. But no pressure, no expectations. Sometimes connections like this are rare enough that they deserve to be acknowledged, whatever form they take. His honesty was disarming, making it easier for me to be honest in return. I'm attracted to you, I admitted. But I'm also temporary here. 3 months, then back to real life. Maybe, Ryan said thoughtfully. Or maybe real life is what you make it. 3 months is plenty of time to figure out what you actually want. He shifted slightly, his hand finding mine under the blankets, fingers intertwining with casual intimacy. Besides, I've always believed in quality over quantity when it comes to time spent with someone worth knowing. The touch of his hand sent a current through me, simultaneously calming and exciting. We sat in comfortable silence for a while, listening to the storm and the crackling fire, the simple connection of our hands speaking volumes. Eventually, Ryan broke the silence with a playful tone. So, Jake from Seattle, since we're stuck here until this storm passes, and we've already covered our life stories, career crises, and philosophical outlooks, what should we talk about now? The lightness in his voice made me smile. Well, we haven't exhausted fishing topics yet. I still haven't heard your opinion on artificial lures versus live bait in different conditions. Ryan laughed, the sound warm and genuine. Now you're just trying to get me all worked up. That's at least a 3-hour debate in fishing circles. I've got time, I replied, surprising myself with how much I meant it. What happened next seemed both inevitable and surprising. Ryan turned toward me, his free hand gently touching my face, his eyes asking a question. I answered by closing the distance between us, our lips meeting in a kiss that started tentative but quickly deepened. There was none of the awkwardness of first kisses, no bumped noses or uncertainty about angles. Instead, it felt like a conversation continued in a different language, one our bodies already knew how to speak. His beard was softer than I expected against my skin, his hand warm as it moved to the back of my neck. When we finally pulled apart, both slightly breathless, Ryan smiled in a way that made my heart skip. Been wanting to do that since you walked into the shop looking all disappointed about the closed sign. If I'd known that was an option, I would have been much less disappointed, I replied, surprised by my own boldness. What followed was both playful and intense. More kisses, exploratory touches, the blankets falling away as we discovered each other. There was an ease to it all, a natural progression that felt both exciting and somehow right. In the confined space of the cabin, with the storm creating a world that consisted only of us, we created our own weather system of desire and connection. At one point, as things heated up, I pulled back slightly, an old habit of caution asserting itself. Maybe we should slow down. We barely know each other. Ryan looked at me thoughtfully, his hand resting lightly on my chest. Sometimes I think we put too much emphasis on time as a measure of knowing someone. I've had year-long relationships where I never felt as seen as I do right now with you. He paused, his expression serious. But we can absolutely slow down if that's what you want. No rush, no expectations. His respect for my boundaries only made me want him more. It's not that I want to stop, I clarified. It's just, I'm not usually this spontaneous. Ryan smiled, a hint of mischief in his eyes. Maybe that's exactly why you should be. Isn't that what this sabbatical is about? Finding out who you are beyond the usual patterns. He had a point. Wasn't that why I'd come to Cedar Cove? To break patterns, to discover what might be possible outside the carefully constructed life I'd built? You make a compelling argument, I said, pulling him closer again. I've been told I can be very persuasive, he murmured against my lips before kissing me again. What followed was one of those perfect nights that seem almost dreamlike in retrospect, passionate, tender, punctuated with laughter and conversations that ranged from profound to playfully ridiculous. The narrow bunk barely accommodated us both, but that only created a welcome excuse for closeness. Outside, the storm gradually subsided, but we created our own world inside the cabin, exploring and connecting in ways that went beyond the physical. Morning found us tangled together, sunlight streaming through the cabin's single window. The storm had passed, leaving behind that particular freshness that follows a heavy rain. Ryan was already awake, watching me with a soft expression that made my chest tight in the best possible way. "Morning," he said simply. "Sleep okay?" I stretched, aware of pleasant aches that reminded me of our night together. Better than I have in months, actually, despite the accommodations. Ryan chuckled, running a hand through his tousled hair. Yeah, ranger cabins aren't exactly five-star hotels. But the company makes up for it, I think. There should have been awkwardness, the morning after realization of how quickly things had progressed, the uncertainty of what comes next. Instead, there was a surprising comfort, as if we'd known each other much longer than a single day and night. We dressed in our now dry clothes, packed up the few supplies we'd used, and made sure the cabin was left in good condition for the next visitors. The morning air was crisp and clean as we made our way back to Ryan's boat, the water calm after the previous night's turbulence. "So," Ryan said as he steered us back toward Cedar Cove, "not exactly the fishing trip I promised you." I laughed, feeling lighter than I had in years. "I'm not complaining, though I am wondering what happens now." Ryan glanced at me, his expression open. "Well, I was thinking breakfast at the diner in town would be a good start. After that, I'm open to possibilities." "Possibilities," I repeated, testing the word. "I like the sound of that." "Just to be clear," Ryan added, his tone more serious. "Last night wasn't just. I'm not looking for a vacation fling. I like you, Jake. I'd like to see where this could go, even knowing you might not stay." His honesty was refreshing, no games, no pretense. "I like you too," I admitted. "And I'm not sure about anything in my life right now, except that I want to spend more time with you." Ryan's smile was like sunrise breaking across his face. "Then that's where we start. One day at a time." As Cedar Cove came into view, I felt a strange sense of coming home, despite having lived there only a few weeks. Perhaps home wasn't a place, but a feeling. The feeling of being authentic, of being seen and accepted, of possibilities opening rather than closing. "You know," Ryan said as he skillfully docked the boat, "Mom's going to take one look at us and know exactly what happened." I felt a moment of panic. Will that be a problem? Ryan laughed, reaching out to help me onto the dock. Only because she'll be insufferably smug about her matchmaking skills, despite having nothing to do with it. He pulled me close once I was on solid ground. Unless you consider closing the shop early to be a sophisticated matchmaking strategy. Well, it worked, didn't it? I said, surprising myself with my boldness as I leaned in for a quick kiss. Yeah, Ryan agreed, his eyes crinkling with happiness. I guess it did. As we walked hand in hand toward town and the promised breakfast, I couldn't help thinking about how unexpected life could be. I'd come to Cedar Cove looking for answers, for direction, for some grand revelation about my future. Instead, I'd found Ryan, not an answer, but a possibility. A chance to explore who I might be if I allowed myself to live authentically, to follow joy rather than expectations. I didn't know if I would stay in Cedar Cove beyond my planned 3 months. I didn't know if what Ryan and I had found in that stormbound cabin would grow into something lasting. But for the first time in years, the uncertainty didn't feel frightening. It felt like freedom. Sometimes the bait shop closes early, and you find yourself caught in a storm. And sometimes, if you're very lucky, that storm leads you exactly where you need to be. Total _char_count. 18,725.